Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the series, Journey of Fiqh number 4. In today's lesson, we'll be going through the madhahib, or the schools of fiqh of the Sahaba, just recapping from last week, and then of the Tabi'in, and then we'll start discussion on the four madhabs and the Imams of the four madhabs, the four well-known schools that are established in the Ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this lesson beneficial and the knowledge in it beneficial, that affects the heart, inshallah, and that Allah gives us tawfiq, that by it we have an appreciation for all the efforts that have gone in transmission of the deen to us, and inshallah gives us tawfiq to do righteous actions accordingly, inshallah. Ameen. So as we learned last week, so the first slide we saw last week was of the various Sahaba radiallahu anhum, those were prolific in issuing fatwas, those were intermediate, and those that gave few fatwas. In total, there's 130 Sahaba radiallahu anhum whose fatwa have been transmitted to us. It doesn't mean that only 130 Sahaba gave or issued fatwas, but we only have a record of 130. Among them, of course, as mentioned last week, that there were some that were known to give more fatwas than others. Like Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Aisha, Sayyidina Zayd, and Ibn Abbas, and Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma. Some of these Sahaba radiallahu anhum had established schools, as we learned, that there was actually a madrasa that they established, a school that they established, and they trained muftis and ulama of the Tabi'in and the next generation according to a given specific system. From them, four were outstanding: Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. We'll get to that in a moment. The Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, his school was established because he was sent to Kufa by Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Just even when he sent the letter, the message to the people of Kufa, he said, I preferred you over myself in regards to Ibn Mas'ud. Meaning that I could have kept him Madinah Munawwarah with me, but I didn't, and I sent him to you. I preferred you over myself in regards to Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. So they should learn, not waste him, and to learn from him. And the people of Kufa, the Imams and the ulama of the Tabi'in, they took full advantage and learned, and a whole school was established around Sayyidina Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu was the most knowledgeable Imam and Mufti of Madinah Munawwarah after the passing away of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. He was the leading authority of Madinah Munawwarah. And around him, students were established, school was established, and they used to give fatwa. Even after his passing away, they followed his system of issuing fatwa and the way they narrated and practiced the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. After he passed away in Madinah Munawwarah, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu became the chief authority among the people of knowledge in Madinah Munawwarah, among the Sahaba and the Tabi'in radiallahu anhum. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu continued, although Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he took over the leadership of ilm in Madinah Munawwarah after Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, but you cannot say that he was a follower, a muqallid, or a follower of Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. In reality, he was a mujtahid. He had independent juristic reasoning and school and preference, which he had his own school. But the students of Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu continued with Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, or that circle halaqa continued and was inherited by Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. In Makkah Mukarramah was Sayyidina Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. He was the leading figure in the Meccan school, and around him there was an established school. Then there's other Sahaba radiallahu anhu who are from the intermediate categories. 13 names: Abu Bakr, Osman, Sa'ad, Salama, Anas, Abu Sa'id, Abu Huraira, Abu Sayyidina Khudri radiallahu anhu, Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, Abdullah ibn Amr, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu, Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, Abu Musa al-Ashari, Jabir, Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, Salman al-Farsi radiallahu anhu. And Sayyidina Mu'adh radiallahu anhu was known as the most knowledgeable person in regards to halal and haram. Umar radiallahu anhu said about Zayd that he was Zayd bin Thabit, he's the most knowledgeable in fara'id, in the inheritance laws. I mean, he was a mufti, but he was a special, as a mujtahid and imam, but he specialized and he outdid everybody when it came to inheritance. And the person had the most fiqh. If you need fiqh, then you should go, if you want to know fara'id, go to Zayd bin Thabit. If you want to know fiqh, then go to Mu'adh bin Jabal radiallahu anhuma. And if you want wealth, meaning that because he was Khalifa Amir al-Mu'mineen and he was head of the treasury of the Muslims, then if you need help, anything, then come to Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. Allahu alam. So these were the Sahaba from the intermediate level, meaning their fatwa were narrated less than the first group, was not as prolific. And then you had the last group, and there's 10 of them mentioned there. Abu Darda, Hassan and Hussein, Ubayd ibn Ka'b, Abu Ayyub, Asma, Zayd ibn Arqam, Thawban and Burayda radiallahu anhum. That's 20 altogether. There's another 110 whose names have been recorded, but very few fatwa. Could be one fatwa, could be two fatwas they could have issued. So very less fatwas, so their names have not been mentioned here. Remember that these madahib, these 4 Sahaba that I mentioned, Abdullah bin Abbas, Ibn Umar, Zayd bin Thabit, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, how is it that can they establish a school or a madhab? This is a natural thing. This is not, people should not be surprised by this, that how is it people can take an authority in deen. Some people have this misgiving. How can they become an authority and speak in regards to deen when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the Imam of Anbiya alayhi salam? But it's a natural thing that will happen throughout all the ages, where a Imam, as soon as a person sits to teach deen, a halaqa will form. People gravitate, because not everybody can become an Imam. I'm not talking about Imam al-Masjid. I'm talking about an Imam, an authority in deen, a senior mufti, an alim mujtahid. Not everyone can do that. It's not practically possible, because the whole world, there's different jobs, different things are going to get done, different pressures are there. So some people will outdo and they'll become authorities, and people will gravitate towards them. And the people follow the system. And this is not something that should be disliked or despised or considered something strange. It's a natural thing that happens in this world. So the next slide is, you can see there, as I mentioned before, the 3 cities or 3 areas, Mecca, Medina and Iraq, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah has elaborated this in his book, Al-I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, and how these schools were established, and who are the ones that how these schools were established, and the ins and outs of these schools. And I'll mention that after Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu, he was the authority, then Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. And the next slide, if you have a look at it, the fuqaha of, so now we come into the next era, which is the fuqaha and the jurists of the Tabi'in. In this history of fiqh, or the era of fiqh, there are 4 main schools that are established: the school of Madinah, the school of Mecca, the school of Basra, and the school of Kufa. Kufa is a city in Iraq, where Imam Hanifa was from, where Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu settled. So in the school in Madinah Muwarrah, there are famous Imams amongst the Tabi'in. So after the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, you'll see that most of the Imams are either the freed slave of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they became the authorities of the Muslims, or you'll see the children or the grandchildren of Sahaba radiallahu anhu themselves, because they spend the most time with them, they learn deen from them. So if you see in Madinah Munawwarah, there's a unique group of scholars in the fiqh books, without having to say anything, if we just say the fuqaha sab'ah, the 7 fuqaha, the 7 jurists, automatically everybody knows who those people are. They're 7 tabi'in who were authorities of the Imam. They're like the 7 muftis of Madinah Munawwarah. When they agreed, so when the fuqaha say ittafaqa sab'ah, the 7 agreed, meaning all the 7 muftis of the Tabi'in, the mujtahid, those Imams in their own right, and they were the students of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, like Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu. The 7 fuqaha was Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Urwa bin Zubayr, the son of Zubayr radiallahu anhu. Father was Sahabi, Zubayr ibn Awam, one of the 10 promised Jannah. The son was Abdullah bin Zubayr radiallahu anhu's younger brother. Abdullah bin Zubayr was the older brother, was a Sahabi, the younger brother was a Tabi'i. Qasim bin Muhammad, Qasim is the grandson, Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. He's the grandson of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Sulaiman ibn Yasar, Kharij ibn Zayd, Abu Bakr ibn Abdurrahman, and Ubaidullah. So these are the 7 fuqaha. Then you have Imam Nafi', Imam az-Zuhri. Imam Nafi' was a freed slave of Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu. In the science of hadith, the golden chain, what is referred to as silsilat al-dhahabiyya, the golden chain, meaning the most strongest and authentic chain of narration. is Imam Malik, narrated from Imam Nafi', narrated from Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. So, so this is considered the strongest chain when it comes to the narration of hadith. So this is the school of Madinah, which a lot of it Imam Malik rahmatullah, who was known as Imam Dar al-Hijrah, inherited, because he studied either with them or their students. The Imam Malik rahmatullah, he lived his whole life in Madinah Munawwarah, so all the ulama of Madinah Munawwarah, their knowledge ended with Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi. Then in Makkah Mukarramah, the authority, of course, we know in the Sahaba's generation, the school that established was the Sahabi radiallahu anhu was Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, and his students are the Imams of the Tabi'in, Ata, Ta'us, Mujahid, Ikrama. And you see their names, especially when it comes to tafsir, because they took tafsir. They are Imams of tafsir, Imams in general, but you especially see their names come up in the tafsir, in the commentaries of the Quran. In Basra, Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, Ibn Sirin, Muhammad ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, who is known for one thing among journalists about dream interpretation, but Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, is one of the fuqaha of the Tabi'in in Basra. Abu Qilaba and Qatada. These are four that were in Basra. In Kufa, now Kufa, because Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu settled there, and the Bab of knowledge, the door of knowledge, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu also settled there. He made his capital during his Khilafah, Kufa. So you'll see that the students of Imam, the students of Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, so for example, Imam Alqama, he was in Kufa, and his student was Ibrahim al-Nakha'i rahimullah, and his student was Hamad, who was a teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimullah. So Imam Hanifa, then Hamad, then Imam Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, and then Alqama, and then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. That's a school that their generation after each of these people is a mujtahid in his own right, but there is a chain there of imamat and authority in fiqh. Masruq, also student of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, Abida, Salmani, and he also took from Ali radiallahu anhu as well. And then you have Qadi Shuraih, the famous Qadi, who was in Umar ibn Khattab at time as Qadi, Chief Justice of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, a very amazing person of this ummah. Whole books are written. Each of these person, you can write a big book on their life and their judgments and so forth. So this is the era of the Tabi'in. Then in the next slide, you'll see this is a slide that we went through before. So just to give you a recap of the various eras, the establishment, of course, is the era of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then the stages before the madhahib, which we're in now, and then the era of the madhahib, which we're about to start. Inshallah, that's going to be quite a detailed study of each of the madhabs and the imams of the four madhabs. And then you have the modern era, which is the last 130, 140 years or so. As for the, if we go to the next slide, so you've got the four imams and their dates of birth and death. So Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, he was born in 80 after Hijrah. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu is one of the Sahaba, one of the last Sahaba to die. He died in 93 after Hijrah. So we'll go into that in the next few sessions, inshallah. Regarding that, there is a view that he is a tabi'i, that he met Sahaba radiallahu anhum and established that he was a tabi'i. Others have disputed it, but we'll go in that in detail, inshallah. He died in 150 after Hijrah. In the same year that he died, another great incident happened. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayhi was born 150 after Hijrah. So some even said, but it's not a very strong narration, that the day that Imam Hanifa died is the day that Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi passed away, is the day that Imam Shafi was born. And so Imam Malik was born in 93 after Hijrah. It's the same year that Anas ibn Malik passed away. So Imam Malik's name is Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik, and the Sahabi radiallahu anhu is Anas ibn Malik. Is there any relation between the two? There's no relation between the two. So we shouldn't say that Malik ibn Anas is the grandson or something of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, Sahabi. Although one passed away in 1 year, coincidentally one passed in 1 year, and the other one was in the same year, and the other one was born in the same year. radiallahu anhum. Imam Malik passed away in 179 after Hijrah, and Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, they are both contemporaries. They met and exchanged ideas and fiqh and so forth. Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayhi was born in 150 after Hijrah, as I mentioned earlier, and he died in 204 after Hijrah. Imam Ahmad rahmatullah alayhi is the last of the four great Imams of the established schools that we know of and we're familiar with, and he was born in 164 after Hijrah and died in 241 after Hijrah. And we'll go through the details of this in later sessions, inshallah. In the next slide, you can see this slide shows an outline of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. They're linked to the four Imams. They're linked to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum's madrasas. So if you look on the right, you got the Iraqi school. You got Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, obviously, as mentioned earlier, and his student, as I mentioned earlier, Al-Qam, Ibrahim, Hamad, and Hanifa rahimahullah. This is generally the link in fiqh to Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi. Then if you look at the Meccan school, you see Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and then his students Aamir ibn Dinar, and then Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah. So, and then you've got the Madinah school, the two main personalities, Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu and Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu's student was Imam Nafi and Salih Nafi', and who was also teacher Imam Malik rahimahullah, or Imam Malik rahimahullah narrated from him, and is considered the strongest chain of narrations mentioned earlier. Then you have Salim and Zuhri, and he's a teacher Imam Malik, and Imam Malik is a teacher Imam Shafi rahimahullah. It says Imam Ahmad Hanbal is a student in the slide, the way it says it, that he, as though he's a student Imam Shafi'i. Imam Ahmad did take from Imam Shafi'i, but you cannot call him a student Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. So in the sense that he stayed a long period of time, studied with him. And Imam Shafi himself also, he took from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. In hadith, he took a lot benefited a lot. And he said that I benefited more from him than he benefited from me. So there is although we put it below because he's junior to him, but we cannot say that he's a student of Imam Shafi rahimahullah explicitly. Also, if Imam Ahmad Hanbal took from, and this is there's something to understand about the fiqh madhahib. There is a common language between the four schools. So really, these schools should then work in isolation, create their own structures, they've got nothing to do with each other. But that's not the case. The madhahib can communicate with each other, they use a similar language, and so forth. And a lot of that is to do with the integration in this but at the time of Ahmad and beyond, generally there's a level of similarity, although each school has its own terminology sometimes in certain cases, but it's familiar to the other schools. Generally, a mufti in one school should not and does not give fatwa in another school that he's not studied in. That's a different thing. But we understand the language, the faqih of the other school. If you're in one school, if you're Hanbali and you've only trained as Hanbali, you'll still have a familiarity because the language they talk is the same. The terminology generally they use is the same. But a qualification is a different thing, and giving ijazah to give fatwa in a certain madhab is a different thing. But there is a familiarity. So you'll find there's an integration of this generation, the later fuqaha of this early era, is that, so for example, Imam Ahmad Hanbal, although he's later, he was Imam Shafi's student, was Imam Malik's student, so he's got that lineage. Then he also was studied with the Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah, who was the student of the student of Ibn Abbas, which is the Meccan school. He also studied with Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan Shaybani, the chief students of Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi. Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, his madhab is a interesting school. It's considered like the first fiqh council. It's not an individual. He gathered a whole council, and we'll go through that, his system. He gathered all the experts of that region around him, his students, and when they discussed an issue, they would take each other's opinions. Imam Hanif would ask the opinion of Qadi Yusuf and Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan Shaybani, rahimahullah, and others, experts in language and hadith and so forth. Sometimes an issue was discussed for a whole month before it was written down as the official stance of the school. So as a fatwa and a final word on the school. So it is considered in Islam the first, as far as the ulama are concerned, it's considered a collective school, not based on an individual, number one. And it is and it's a collection of views, and many of the views within the school, there are views that are taken that are not Imam Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi. From that council that was sitting there, the position of other imams were taken. Sometimes the 3-4 positions were recorded, and later scholars give preference to the one based on the principles of Imam Hanifa rahimahullah. So Imam Ahmad Hanbal took from Imam Hanifa's students, Imam Hassan al-Shaybani, he said like a whole camel load of knowledge was taken from him, and Imam Abu Yusuf Qadi Abu Yusuf as well. So he's got the advantage of taking from Imam Hanifa's student, from the Meccan school, and from the Medina school as well. Imam Abu, and each of these schools have their own specialties and their own excellence. Imam Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi was known for his strong argumentation and the way he can prove an argument. I believe Imam Malik rahmatullahi said that if you wanted to prove that this pillar, like even a wooden pillar, is made out of gold, he will convince you that it's made out of gold. His debating skills, his argumentation skills were uncomparable. So he could, his proofs and his argumentations were very strong in debating. Imam Ahmad Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi had the excellence which no other Imam had of the most collection of the memorized statements of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Incidents and the words of Sahaba, no other Imam had the amount of knowledge of the athar or the sayings of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So he collected all the sayings and the fatwa of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So this is the excellence of Imam. And also there's a sha'ir, he said about Imam Ahmad that he was the great Imam, the most knowledgeable of the athar, the narrations Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And when the mouths were shut, the only one to raise the voice on behalf of Ahlul Sunnah, this is what Imam Ahmad is famous for, other than his school, is that when the Mu'tazila was a sect that took over the Abbasi Khilafah, the Khilaf Muslim, the Abbasi Khalifa, and the followers and the Ummah generally, and many Imams, most people were too scared to say anything. The one that rose against the Abbasi Khalifa in terms of his voice in forbidding the evil was Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. He saved, that's why he's called the Imam Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because he saved the Islam and the Iman of the Muslims by rising against the, not making rebellion, but intellectually rising and refusing to accept the false aqidah of the false beliefs of the Mu'tazila sect, which have overtaken and running the Khilafah and being Qadis and so forth. Like the state religion was the Mu'tazila at that time, and they refused to bow to that. And we, as an Ummah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless him the best of rewards on behalf of the Ummah for saving the Iman of the Ummah. So each of these Imams has a exclusive specialty that the whole Ummah and the other Madahib also benefit. They have an insight that we can appreciate. Imam Malik rahmatullahi alayhi was a teacher. Imam Shafi rahmullah, Imam Malik said to Imam Shafi, Allah has put a nur in your heart, don't extinguish it with sins. He acknowledged the excellence of Imam Shafi rahmatullahi. Although he was a student, Imam Shafi rahmullah, as the ulama have mentioned, that he combined, like Imam Ahmad, he combined the Iraqi schools and the Hijazi schools. So the rational schools and the traditional school. So he combined these two. He synthesized and systemized the two schools, as the Shaykh Taha Karan from South Africa, and he talks about the development of the Shafi fiqh. He talks about this. He did something unique. He combined that the traditionalist, the hadith-based school of the Hijaz, of Mecca and Medina, and the Iraqi rational school, he combined and synthesized into the Shafi, what is known as the Shafi madhab. So he was a unique person. The first time came and combined these schools. These people, each of these people is a genius, and their work is amazing. It's to be appreciated. That's why one of the ulama in India, he was when he was teaching, although he's a Hanafi, and then he used to say that Shaykh Tahir Karan, he quotes this in one of his talks. He said, "Hamare Imam Shafi farmate." Our Imam Shafi said, although he's a Hanafi, our Imam Shafi said, our Imam Malik said. No, even though maybe following the Hanafi school or the Hanbali school, but the other Imam is not the other, he's our Imam. This is our Imam, these are Imams of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'at. And just the last slide is regarding Imams of extinct schools. So these schools, they existed at a certain point in history. Generally what happened, these schools became extinct. Either became amalgamated into the four, or they just died out and they didn't have any. Now, it doesn't mean that their fatwa don't exist anymore, their books don't exist anymore. What actually happened is that the transmission of the complete school, it's not a complete school. Hence, you're not actually allowed to follow it. and ulama have given issues fatwa on this, like Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali and others gave fatwa, Imam Juwayni rahimahullah and others gave that there's only 4 schools now. 4 complete schools in which there's a lineage that goes right back to the founder of the school, and without break. And then we know the ins and outs, the madhab, and the words of the wording, the terminology of the madhab. It's a complete school. These imams were great, and their fatwas are still in our books, and we appreciate and we acknowledge their knowledge, and we benefit their fatwa and their knowledge. So the first one is Hasan Basri rahimahullah from the Tabi'in. His fatwa, he collected 7 volumes, but it cannot be made into a coherent school that one can follow today. But his views are factored into the other schools, and they're quoted in the books by the other madahib. Sufyan Thawri rahimahullah, Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah said about him that I have not seen anybody more knowledgeable in halal and haram than Sufyan Thawri rahimahullah. Imam Awza'i rahimahullah, who is considered the greatest imam to enter Sham and teach in Sham. And so Imam al-Awza'i, he issued in his lifetime 70,000 fatwas. Fatwas are not like generally fatwas are given today, is just refer to a older fatwa book and just copy it, and then you get the answer from there. This is fatwas derived and researched directly from the Quran and Sunnah. As was their level as a mujtahid, they could do that. Ishaq Lays ibn Sa'd rahimahullah, Imam Shafi'i said about him that he said that he's kana afqah min Malik. He was a greater jurist than his own teacher, Imam Malik. He was also a teacher of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, but he was greater jurist than Imam Malik rahimahullah, but his students wasted his knowledge. So that he's buried in Qarafa or Arafa in Egypt. I had a chance to go there. I was there in the suburb of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah. The suburb is called Imam Shafi'i. So I ended up visiting there. So they said Imam Lays is buried near there. So Lays ibn Sa'd, but his students wasted it, meaning his school wasn't transmitted it. They didn't carry the school on. But his knowledge was greater than Imam. In fiqh was greater than Imam Malik rahimahullah. Lays ibn Sa'd al-Asfahani, Asbahani in Arabic, but Asfahan is in Iran today. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Imam Shafi said about him that Lays and Sufyan and Malik, they were the greatest, in his view, they were the greatest scholars. According to Imam Shafi rahimahullah is giving a recommendation, or he's praising somebody, then we have to pay attention. Ishaq bin Rahawayh was the companion Imam Ahmad. Both him and Imam Ahmad traveled, studied each other, benefited from each other, and they both memorized the most hadiths that we know in history that any Imams memorized. Like we read about Imams memorized 500,000, 700,000, 300,000, like Imam Dawood, Imam Bukhari, and so forth. Ishaq bin Rahawayh and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, they both memorized 1 million hadiths, alf hadiths, a million hadiths each. Between him and Imam Ahmad, their fiqh, their school, there's not much difference. Almost the same, except for the odd 1 or 2 masail. Imam Awza'i, I forgot to mention that he's buried, he's in Sham, and he moved to Beirut, which is in present-day Lebanon, and he's passed away, and he buried there, and he stayed there as a murabit, meaning protecting the Muslim borders or the frontiers of the Muslim lands. So these are the schools that they are extinct or defunct. They no longer exist. The fatwa, these imams exist, but they're not coherent schools that we can copy and replicate and revive the school, because a complete picture of the school is not there with us. So inshallah, regarding the rest, Abu Thawr and Ibn Jarir Tabari and these other imams, inshallah we'll continue in the next session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding and appreciation for the works and sacrifice of the imams of the past. May Allah give us tawfiq to practice what we say in here. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.